I'm here today with Curt Welling, who is a fellow at Dartmouth Tuck Business School. Prior to that, he was a CEO of AmeriCares, and prior to that, he was an investment banker. And Curt, cannot thank you enough. Really appreciate your taking the time. You've had an incredible career. But before we go into that, let's talk a little bit about what life was like growing up as a child.
I grew up in Rochester, New York, which has more in common with Ohio than it does with New England. My family was from New York. I'm a first-generation college kid. My father, who lived until he was 101 and 11/12ths, was a child of the Depression, lived and worked on a farm, and dropped out of college because of the Depression, and ended up being one of the oldest infantrymen in World War II. And, I had a great upbringing in Rochester, and ended up looking for colleges across a couple of vectors, the most important of which was where I would be accessible to my girlfriend, and ended up at Dartmouth, where I was during the fairly turbulent period of the 70s.
Okay. And did you first go to Wall Street and then go to get your MBA, or did you go right into business
No, I went
school?
from basic training and advanced individual training in the military to Vanderbilt Law School, and from Vanderbilt Law School, with a short stop to get admitted to the bar in New York, I went right to business school.
And what do you think about getting your MBA today?
I think it's great. And you know, one of the questions I get asked by young people, particularly MBA, JD, is one superior to the other? Are they both useful, and so on? They're very different educational perspectives. The law is really much more of an intellectual discipline, and the MBA is much more of a skill-based curriculum. What lawyers really learn to do is to take very complicated fact patterns, sort them out, figure out what the decision rules are, and then make decisions based on the rules. What an MBA teaches you to do is to think analytically and critically, primarily along a financial discipline, but with the underlying objective that what you're really trying to do is you're trying to figure out what should animate a business. What should be the proportion and the composition and the critical factors and the critical risks in some sort of a business context, whether that's a for-profit business or a nonprofit.
So Curt, how did you decide to go into Wall Street?
The whole decision process actually started when I was at law school, and I had a summer clerkship, as law students do, at the end of my second year. And I remember coming back from that and saying, you know, I don't know that that's really how I want to spend the rest of my life. And at the same time, I was taking a taxation course and a course in corporate finance. And those actually did excite me, so the idea of going on to business school to add a business degree was hatched.
So Curt, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the MBA today, because as we've discussed, the landscape has changed dramatically over the years in terms of technology, Wall Street. There's arguments as to whether or not you should have an engineering degree or a liberal arts degree. What are your thoughts there?
The concept of liberal arts post-secondary education is a uniquely American concept. It really doesn't exist anywhere else. And the idea was that to be a person of a certain capability who was worthy of occupying a certain place in society, you needed to be exposed to a wide range of disciplines, of classical thought, of language, of mathematics, of sciences, and so on. The contemporary response to that is that's nonsense. The only thing that matters in today's economy, which is about information technology and science, is STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so that pendulum is swinging. I think that in the fullness of time, the pendulum will come to the center, as it always does, and we will recognize that the liberal arts are not so much about dead languages, and they're not about bad poetry. We might have run a little off the rails in terms of political correctness, which is a bit of a sideshow. But the liberal arts are ultimately about critical thinking, understanding the history of critical thinking. Having said that, it's very clear that the academy in the liberal arts is overdue for a reformation. That knowledge is ubiquitous, information is more than ubiquitous and available at zero cost. So there are a lot of highly intelligent voices, including Phil Hanlon, the new president of Dartmouth, who are saying the future of the residential liberal arts undergraduate program is on synthesis. It's on creating opportunities for people to experience, whether that's a research experience as an undergraduate scientist, whether that's a writing experience as an undergraduate English major, whether that's a internship as someone who's thinking about applying science to humanitarian problems, you have to bring the real world together with the theory to create wisdom. The MBA itself is an interesting example of this dynamic, which is a combination of technology, the demands of the business world, and competition have created a very challenging environment for many of the world's most established MBA programs. The rise of global MBA programs that are competitive, the increasing reality that if you're going to send MBAs to companies and those companies are going to see those MBAs as value added, they're going to have a higher level of technical ability and more of a global perspective. If you examine that against what is a consistently declining number of GMAT, the entrance examination for MBA programs, have been declining since 2007. This is an industry which is in a bit of crisis. And so it would be a mistake for any MBA program not to be sitting back and saying, what do we have to do to remake ourselves to be relevant?
Curt, tell us a little bit about the cost of education, because to me, you know, when I look at, I've got two kids that are in school here in New York, and the costs are through the roof, and they seem to do nothing but go up, and that continues on throughout a child's lifetime, in particular if you're sending them to private schools. Is that sustainable?
Yeah, it's not sustainable. It's clearly not sustainable, and there are many voices who are expressing, on the one hand, the view that it's not sustainable. There are not as many voices that are expressing a coherent view of what's going to change that. Competition's a beautiful thing, and one of the things that I learned early on in my time at First Boston is that there's a market analogy for almost everything. There are a finite number of students. As the places that they can go to get information and knowledge that are acceptable in the employment marketplace, as those grow, it's putting pressure on the established base of educational and MBA programs. So whether those are online courses, whether those are joint ventures between people in different parts of the world, something is going to have to happen to bend the cost curve. And when I said earlier that the Liberal Arts Academy is overdue for a reformation, the thing that's going to cause that reformation is the same thing that brought the Soviet Union down in 1990 and is going to have a profound impact on Russia and Iran and these places, is a change in market dynamic. You're already starting to see that. There are some isolated and anecdotal examples of schools that have either shrunk or gone out of business or merged. But ultimately, the idea that it's going to cost you $100,000 a year to achieve a liberal arts education, and at the end of that 4-year period of time, when you have spent that money, it's going to be hard for you to find a job, is telling you that the academy is not responding to the needs of the marketplace taken as a whole. And so that dynamic is going to be interesting to watch.